Let's talk about how Love and Hip Hop Atlanta is flipping tables and flipping networks. Okay. So I watched this week's episode of the premiere of Love and Hip Hop Atlanta season 11. And where are we 11 seasons in? And should you be watching? So I'm not going to dive into the nooks and the crannies of it all in this video. I really wanted to watch this week to determine whether or not this show is still indeed watchable 11 seasons in, because we're starting to see with a lot of franchises, as we get into the seasons past season 10, it begins to feel a little bit like, are we tired of this or not? Are they tired or not? And we get some freshness here in an interesting way, and then some not so fresh. So let's talk about it. I'm not going to dive into the nooks and the crannies, and I'm gonna wait to rate this episode until I finish. So, but this won't be a long video. But I just wanted to give you the nuts and bolts of whether or not I think you should be watching, or I think you might be interested. And I want you to tell me in the comments: did you watch and were you interested? Do you plan to watch after hearing this review? Let me know. I'm really invested in whether or not you guys will be paying attention to the show. Now, I think the first thing that's really noticeable is obviously that this show has moved to MTV. So it's interesting being that this is one of the shows that moved to MTV versus going to BET, given now that we know all about this situation with Tyler Perry and BET and VH1. So it's interesting that Love and Hip Hop Atlanta moved to MTV. Interesting. The other interesting thing to note that's new and fresh outside of Kirk's hair, has he had hair before? I just didn't notice that. Is they confessionals. Now I know that they was trying to do something. I felt like they was trying to go into the housewives route, but it to me did not work. All right. Now, Love and Hip Hop, for example, let me give you an example of what they typically look like. As you guys can see, there's usually the blurred background. It always appears to me that the person is standing so they could do all this with their hands, because y'all know they used to do all that, right? That's how I felt. And what I felt like it did, it differentiated them from, like, housewives type shows where the confessional is more of a sit down affair. And maybe that was changing in the past several years. I really don't. I hadn't. To be honest with you, I hadn't paid attention, but it was so glaringly obvious in this episode because it was so. I For me, it felt so poorly executed. Okay, it was clearly green screen behind them, in some shape or in some shape or form, and it just did not work because I did not feel that they were lit well. When you do these types of confessionals and you want a show, you glamorize certain elements of the show anyway. Love and Hip Hop has always felt a little bit like a music video in terms of the entrances and stuff like that. And to a certain degree, it almost feels like some other shows, kind of picked up on what worked for Love and Hip Hop in terms of how they enter a scene and how it felt flashy like a music video. And so now we see that a lot of times on Housewives. And these are little just production things that I've picked up and sort of analyzed and looked at along the, or maybe noticed in the back of my mind. And so for me, with them sort of moving to this more housewives style confessional sit down, which granted, it makes sense. I'm pretty sure that if the confessionals last for as long as they last when they do a housewives interview, or at least from my own experience, I mean, that could be a couple of hours that you could be standing there. And maybe they weren't standing at all. Maybe they just had a different way of sitting that gave them more free range of motion. I don't know what it was. And clearly before they used green screen, but for whatever reason, they just felt very dark to me. And I don't know why, like very dark, not well lit. And I felt like if you're going to glamorize the entrances and the exits during the actual show, then don't give me this pattern interrupt by giving me this poorly lit confessional interview. I mean, every one of them, I was like, what am I looking at right now? And why does it look so bad to me? And y'all know I don't like to really criticize like a lot of stuff like that, but I gotta be honest with you, it just threw me off every time I looked at it. So there's a couple of glaring, okay, very big differences in this season from past seasons. Um, it from the press release, it looked like this show is going to focus a lot more on the ladies because even when you look at the promo, I felt like you typically would see the men in the promo. But as we see right here, we're only looking at the ladies who are featured. And of course, we know that these aren't even all the ladies that are featured because there's Rennie Rucci who's going to be throwing a drink at Erica Banks. She's not featured here. Shakana's not featured here, and I'm pretty sure she's going to be somewhere running about. But we have the major players here being clearly they've got Rashida front and center as the OG of this particular franchise, which is interesting that she's the longest running on this show. But you also have, of course, Yandy, you have Sierra, Erica Banks, you have Spice, Erica Mena, Jessica, I think it's Jessica White, who is a Nick Cannon ex as well. And I say as well because I'm also watching Selling Sunset, and we have Bree on there, who is also a Nick Cannon affiliated persona because she's also one of his baby's mothers and partners, or however define their relationship. I don't want to diminish that woman to just being a baby mama because she is more than that. But we also have Bambi here. Now, clearly, Bambi this season is going to take center stage, as we've heard Spice say, okay, many times. And we know that there's a beef that's going to be brewing between Spice and Erica Mena, in which case we will see in the preview at the end of this episode, Erica Mena is literally taking a page out of Teresa Giudice's book and flipping a table. Now, I mean, it almost harkens back the way they were seated. It harkened back to Mimi and Carly Red and K Michelle, where K Michelle infamously said, "Woo, this B is shaking the table." Well, Erica's doing a lot more than shaking it. She's picking it up and she's throwing it on top of Spice. Okay. Now, so we do get that sort of reminiscent feel to it. And there's also still I think the genesis for which this show has always felt like it's been built around, which is a love triangle. And in this instance, it is really Bambi who is divorcing Scrappy, and Scrappy and whomever else he is choosing to lay his paws on. Okay. In this instance, it is because of his flirtations or whatever he's got going on with oh Lord, I can't even remember this child's name. Write it down in the chatterization. Diamond. That's who it is, Diamond. Now, we know who Diamond is because, you know, if you've been in the hip hop spaces, you know who I'm talking about. But, you know, and I know that she's going to be featured as part of the show, but really the real topic of conversation is Bambi and this divorce and how Scrappy is doing her wrong. And for him, as of course, in most situations on these shows, the guys fail to really understand where they are going wrong in the situations. And so you have a typical storyline playing out. But I will tell you that it did feel really emotional to me in terms of what we were getting from Bambi, because I do feel like, for whatever reason, 3 kids in, she really thought that this relationship was going to go the distance. And I have to be honest with you guys, from the jump, I never really saw that this was going to be anything that lasted. And I'm not listen, don't get me wrong when I say that, because I hate to say that I feel like I'm judging people's relationships, but just based on the actions throughout the seasons, it never really felt to me like Scrappy was really like the settle down type of dude. Same like with Safari. I mean, it just don't feel like they the types of dudes that really want to be like with one woman. You know what I'm saying? And if that's what you feel, then I feel like that's great. You know, have that, do you, but stop involving, these women that feel like that want something long term and want to build something with you. A lot of these women, they on this show, they are probably looking to build that Beyonce and Jay-Z type of life. And I mean, even we know that even Beyonce and Jay-Z didn't had their issues. And of course, every marriage and every long-term relationship is going to have certain issues that they have to deal with, but it's how you recover from them. And if they keep doing the same things over and over and over again, it's kind of like you got to know who you're dealing with. And I feel like y'all kind of knew who y'all was dealing with. I don't blame you for having hope, because I feel like, a man can show you, a man can say the things, a man can, woo you. Can you woo? You know what I'm saying? They can do it, but at the end of the day, you got to look at the actions, especially when the behaviors are repeated. You know what I'm saying? So I'm super excited for Bambi to go ahead and collect her freedom the same way that I'm excited for Erica Mena to collect hers. Okay. Um, we don't really get to what's going to happen between Bambi, not really Bambi, but Spice and Erica. And what's more confusing to me is we do talk a lot about what happened to Spice when everybody thought that she had, that she had passed away, baby. We thought that she was a goner. But luckily, God had a different story. God had a different plan in mind for Spice. But what I want to know, and what is not fully explained in this situation, is, she talks about having sepsis, and she talks about how she died, and she came back to the life. But what I want to know is, girl, what was you doing? Like, what was it? Was it surgery? I was never too clear on that. And she does not give you, to me, the actual explanation for what she was doing. Like, was you getting a surgery and it went awry? Was this from a previous surgery, or was this completely unrelated to surgery? That's what everybody was saying. So I want to know. And I feel like if you're talking about it, let's talk about it. We do get a lot of interaction with her and the kids. And a lot of this episode is built around the lady supporting Bambi. And Spice being one of those ladies. But we also get the introduction of Erica Banks, who kind of, is letting it be known like she's here for a good time and not a long time. And if the men's want to flirt with her, she's gonna flirt with all of them. It don't matter which one of them. Scrap, his friend K, is it Chaos or something? I can't remember his name. My apologies. So yeah, those are some of the things that are going on. I will tell you that it did feel like, and I know that a lot of times Love and Hip Hop Atlanta can feel a little bit staged, but this definitely felt more of an emotional journey. I felt like people actually had actual stories going on in this first episode. So I found myself actually intrigued and really watching it like, okay. So this is I'm interested. Now, granted, the spice and scrappy of it all, it ain't nothing new, but I did feel like it's new because I feel like she is finally finished, and their dynamic is incredibly hostile. So I'm interested to see how the story unfolds. So I will keep watching. Let me know if you're going to be watching. And if I had to rate this episode on a scale of 1 to 10, I would rate it an 8.5, because I feel like we're just scratching the surface. So I'm a little bit invested, but are you? Let me know in the chat what you guys think, and I will catch you in the next video.